Hello, I'm Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video for the new Boston. In the video we're going to be talking about PHP file handling. Now you can see at the moment I've created a single PHP file called file.php. I haven't named it index.php for the purpose of this tutorial, so we can keep a track of inside this directory. Now let's open up our text editor and we can start writing out in this file. Now PHP file handling is on the basis of first of all opening the file. Then what we do is we want to in this example I'm going to be writing data to a file, but you may want to read data in. So there are different attributes, if you like, you can give when you open the file. The first one is W, and this is for writing, so obviously it stands for writing. The second one is R, which is for reading, so reading. And the third one is A, which means append, or appending, depending on what you want, however you want to say it. So obviously the first one we're going to use which is W, we're going to use to be writing to a file. R, we're going to be reading from a file, and A, we're going to be appending to a file, so basically adding to a file. So let's get rid of this. Okay, so how do we start up? The first thing we need to do is create a handle which will open the file. Now, even if the file doesn't exist, you can see at the moment inside here, no other files except file.php exist. We create something called a handle which uses the fopen function to create the file, even if it doesn't exist. So the first argument we give it is the file name itself. Then we use a comma, and the second argument we give is whether we want to either write to the file, read from the file, or append to the file. So in this instance I want to write to the file, so I'm going to use W. I want to write to the file, and the file I'm going to call is going to be called names.txt. So it's a text file, so we can open it up and we can view it as a text. Okay, so now if we execute this PHP script, or if we run this PHP script rather, let's just refresh here and click on file.php. Nothing has happened as per yet. If we go back and refresh, you can see that a file has been created called names.txt, so we can click on it. There's nothing in it at the moment. So the next stage is to come down, and what we need to do is to write some data to the file. So we don't need to use a variable for this. We've already created our handle in a variable up here, and it's really important to create this as a variable because when we want to write to the file we need to address the handle. So I'm just going to type fwrite, use this function, and in the brackets I want to write first of all the handle, so I want to specify where I'm writing to. So I want to write to names.txt, and then I want to specify the data that I'm writing. So I'm just going to type in Alex. Now what this is going to do is we're going to obviously reiterate the code. This is going to run as well. It won't duplicate obviously the file. It will just create the same file, and it will write Alex to it. Now if we come in and refresh and click on file, if we go back and we click on names, you can see that Alex has been written. Now you may think, oh, now what we can do now is even if we change this, we want to say write Billy, because we've still got this write here, all it's going to do is it's going to reopen the file, and it's going to write again. So unless we do something like the following, Billy like that, every time we're going to be opening the file. So now if we come back and click on file.php and we go back again to names, you can see that it's written two names now. Now say I want this on a line by line basis. How do I go about this? Now you need to append on it absolutely has to be double quotation marks, and you do a backslash and an N, and this creates a new line. So now let's go back, click on file.php again, click on names, and you can see that a new line exists between the end of this and the start of that. So it's written to a new line. So we can write as many names down this list as we want. So these are the basics of writing to a file with PHP. In some of the other lessons, we're going to learn how to read data from a file, and we can also mess around with showing it as array elements. So for example, Alex would be an element in an array and Billy would be an element in an array. Now one final note just before we end the tutorial is the importance of the close function, and you need to specify in here the file that you've already opened. So we've opened handle here. And closing the file just closes this connection with the file, so it doesn't remain open. So this is just close the file. We can echo after here, let's say written, and let's go back, click on file, written. We can go to names.txt. We can say that these two names have already been written. So in the next part of the file handling tutorials, we're going to learn how to read from a file. In fact, we could probably learn, beforehand you might need to think about how you want to append to a file. This is always going to open it and write the content here that, it's going to sort of create a new file. So even if names do exist within this, if I was to under here open the file again and rewrite some names, it would just erase everything. So I think in the next tutorial we can look at appending data to a file. Hello, I'm Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a video for the new Boston. In the video we're going to be talking about PHP file handling. Now you can see at the moment I've created a single PHP file called file.php. I haven't named it index.php for the purpose of this tutorial, so we can keep a track of inside this directory. Now let's open up our text editor and we can start writing out in this file. Now PHP file handling is on the basis of first of all opening the file. Then what we do is we want to either, in this example I'm going to be writing data to a file, but you may want to read data in. So there are different attributes, if you like, you can give when you open the file. The first one is W, and this is for writing, so obviously it stands for writing. The second one is R, which is for reading, so reading. And the third one is A, which means append. So, or appending, depending on what you want, however you want to say it. So obviously the first one we're going to use which is W, we're going to use to be writing to a file. R, we're going to be reading from a file, and A, we're going to be appending to a file, so basically adding to a file. So let's get rid of this. Okay, so how do we start up? The first thing we need to do is create a handle which will open the file. Now, even if the file doesn't exist, you can see at the moment inside here, no other files except file.php exist. We create something called a handle which uses the fopen function to create the file, even if it doesn't exist. So the first argument we give it is the file name itself. Then we use a comma, and the second argument we give is whether we want to either write to the file, read from the file, or append to the file. So in this instance I want to write to the file, so I'm going to use I'm going to use W. I want to write to the file, and the file I'm going to call is going to be called names.txt. So it's a text file, so we can open it up and we can view it as a text. Okay, so now if we execute this PHP script, or if we run this PHP script rather, let's just refresh here and click on file.php. Nothing has happened as per yet. If we go back and refresh, you can see that a file has been created called names.txt, so we can click on it. There's nothing in it at the moment. So the next stage is to come down And what we need to do is to write some data to the file. So we don't need to use a variable for this. We've already created our handle in a variable up here. And it's really important to create this as a variable, because when we want to write to the file, we need to address the handle. So I'm just going to type fwrite, use this function, and in the brackets, I want to write first of all the handle, so I want to specify where I'm writing to. So I want to write to names.txt, and then I want to specify the data that I'm writing. So I'm just going to type in Alex. Now what this is going to do is we're going to obviously reiterate the code. This is going to run as well. It won't duplicate obviously the file. It will just create the same file, and it will write Alex to it. Now if we come in and refresh and click on file, if we go back and we click on names, you can see that Alex has been written. Now you may think, oh, now what we can do now is even if we change this, we want to say write Billy, because we've still got this write here, all it's going to do is it's going to reopen the file, and it's going to write again. So unless we do something like the following, Billy like that, every time we're going to be opening the file. So now if we come back and click on file.php and we go back again to names, you can see that it's written 2 names now. Now say I want this on a line by line basis. How do I go about this? Now you need to append on it has to be it absolutely has to be double quotation marks, and you do a backslash and an N, and this creates a new line. So now let's go back, click on file.php again, click on names, and you can see that a new line exists between the end of this and the start of that. So it's written to a new line. So we can write as many names down this list as we want. So these are the basics of writing to a file with PHP. In some of the other lessons, we're going to learn how to read data from a file, and we can also mess around with showing it as array elements. So for example, Alex would be an element in an array, and Billy would be an element in an array. Now one final note, just before we end the tutorial, is the importance of the fclose function, and you need to specify in here the file that you've already opened. So we've opened handle here. And closing the file just closes this connection with the file, so it doesn't remain open. So this is just close the file. We can echo after here, let's say written, and let's go back, click on file, written. We can go to names.txt. We can say that these 2 names have already been written. So in the next part of the file handling tutorials, we're going to learn how to read from a file. In fact, we could probably learn, beforehand you might need to think about how you want to append to a file. This is always going to open it and write the content here that, it's going to sort of create a new file. So even if names do exist within this, if I was to under here open the file again and rewrite some names, it would just erase everything. So I think in the next tutorial we can look at appending data to a file. Hello again, this is Alex from phpacademy.org producing this video for the New Boston. Now in the last file handling example we looked at appending data, and we created this form here which appended data to the end of this file here. And so far we've appended 4 names. Now what happens if we want to read in this data? I want to read in each name and display them to the user. And what we're going to do is we're going to create this inside this process here. So when they submit a new name, it just reproduces a list of the current names. And I don't want to reproduce a list of it on a line by line basis, I want to produce it separated by commas. Now you may look at this file and think, how are we going to do this, because they're not separated by commas, they're on a line by line basis. Well, we have various functions that allow us to open files and read in on a line by line basis. Now remember, using the for each statement, we can use that again here. So what I'm going to do is, underneath here, I'm going to create a little section for myself to read this file in. In fact, we can do it under the F close. It'd probably be a lot better. So let's create a variable called readIn. This is going to be using the file function. This time we're not using fopen, we're just using file. And what we can do is we can specify a file here, and we're going to specify the file type of R, so we're reading that data in. So that is obviously going to be names.txt. So let's just add another name to the list and just double check if this works properly. Sandra, click submit. Expects parameter 2 to be long. Oh, right, okay. Okay, so let's get rid of that. So we're basically just reading this in. We're using the file function to read this in. There's no need to use this. Because we're reading in on a line by line basis, we're using this file function rather than fopen. So for now, just stick to this file function, and we're going to read it in that way. So let's refresh that. Actually, that will have written. So let's just check back on that. Okay, yes, we've got Sandra added to the end of the list. So our goal is to read the file in, which we've done. Now what we want to do is use for each. Okay, and we want to say read in as name. Okay, so or F name we'll call it, because it's the name within the file. So now what we can do with standard notation with the for each, we can echo out this F name each time, and then what we can do is we can append a comma onto the end of it. So the process goes, we start a variable called readIn. We use the file function to read in this names.txt file. What this will do, this function will do, is it will read in the line on read in the file, sorry, on a line by line basis. There are other ways to do this, but they're a bit more complicated. However, this is the easiest way possible. Now what we're doing is we're using a for each statement, and we're using the array that's been read in, and we're using this array, each element of this array, as F name. Then we're echoing out F name with a comma. So above this we could write current names in file, and then that should echo them out. Now you'll probably notice that when we run the script, we're going to have an extra comma after the list. So let's just try and add another name to this and see what happens. So I'm going to say Dan, and I'm going to click submit. Now you'll see it says current names in file, Alex, comma, Billy, comma, Stephen. At the moment it's not looking too great, so let's just tidy that up. We need to first of all see what's going on here. Now Alex has a space after it, as does Billy, as does every other name in the list, and we can use a function called trim to trim this down, and this removes white space from the start and the end of our name, as well as any other special characters. So just by adding this function around the name as we echo it, we can see that it's actually, if we add another name in, let's say Josh, submit, you can see that it's removed that white space. Now what we can do is we can just get rid of or add a space in after that. We'll add another name in, let's say Dale. Okay, so now you can see that it's displaying properly. Now what we need to do is we need to analyze this problem that we've got with a comma at the end here. So as well as reading a file in this tutorial, we want to actually read it in properly and display things properly. So we need a way of counting all the elements in this text file. And we can do that with the count function. So I'm going to create a new variable here called readIn count, and that's going to equal count, the function count, and we're going to input the readIn array, which is created from this here. So we're counting the values in the array. Now what we can do is get rid of this, and we can start an if statement here. Now I'm going to say if count doesn't equal read in count, and we're going to say echo comma and then a space afterwards. Sorry. So what's happening here, we're counting the elements in the array, and each element in the array is a name, so we're counting the names essentially. Let's just declare this count variable up here as 0. Okay, so if count, which is this here, doesn't equal read in count, then echo that. Then we need to count plus plus at the end, so we're incrementing this count value each time. This will be 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to the amount of names that are in the list. Then when we reach the last one, it's not going to show the comma. So let's add another name in. Let's say Peter. Click submit. Oh, it actually has. Okay. So let's fix this. So if count, let's think about this logically. If count doesn't equal read in count, if count is smaller than or greater than, yeah, it'll be smaller than. So if count is smaller than read in count, let's add another name to the list. We'll just do Daniel this time and click submit. Oh dear. Okay. Count is 1. Let's change that to 1 perhaps. I think that might be the problem. We'll just keep adding Daniel. There we go. Okay. So after a bit of fiddling around, what we've done is we have created a variable called count and assigned the value of 1. Then we incremented this each time, but just before this we've created a check to see if the count is smaller than the amount of elements in this file, the amount of names. And if it is smaller, then that means that's fine. We can echo out a comma. Otherwise, if we've got to the last element in the array, then we want to we don't want to echo a comma because it's silly echoing a comma in the end. So after this tutorial and me making a couple of mistakes and correcting myself, I'm sure you've learnt a thing or two. So that's the end of this tutorial about reading in files with PHP. Hello, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and this is another video for the new Boston on appending data onto the end of a file, or the contents inside the file. So we've already established, we've opened up names.txt with the property of write, so we're writing to it. We've written the name Alex and Billy, and we also have closed the file and then given a written confirmation. So what I'm actually going to do now is I'm going to open up the file itself. So yeah, names.txt. Now what happens if I want to add to this list? So I'm going to change this to A. Okay, now I'm going to put Stephen, that's fine, and I'm going to put Tom. So what I've done now is I've already written a name. In fact, let's just get rid of that. I've already written names to this file. If we go back and have a look, refresh it, Alex and Billy. Now what I want to do is say another line break after Billy, write the name Stephen and then another line break. And this is appending, whereas before if we were doing W, it would overwrite everything in the file. So if we use A and we go back and we click on file, we can see that it's simply added it to the end of the list. Now if we go back, I'll show you an example in case you haven't caught it. If I was to just do a W, now watch what happens when I run the file. So file.php, we go back, you can see now that we just have the name Stephen and we have that line break before that. So you can now understand the importance of using the W or the append. Now, why do we have these two features? Obviously, we need to at one instant we need to open up a file and write to it, and then we close it, and we may never need to use it again. However, in most cases, we'll be opening up a file and rewriting names to it. And I'm going to give you a real life example. Let's we'll just tighten this code up a bit here. And we're going to keep it as append, but I'm going to get rid of this just here for now. Now I'm going to come under here and I'm going to create a form, and the action of the form is going to be file.php, the file we're currently using, and the method is going to be post. Now what I'm going to do is end the form, and I'm going to specify a form field for the user to enter a name. So name, and then input type equals text, name equals name. I'm going to break down a couple more lines, and input type equals submit, and the value of that is submit. So this is what we're displaying to the user. Okay, so let's just comment out this code for now and preview our form, and we can see what it looks like. Oh no, that's names.txt, file.php. Okay, so this is what it looks like. Let's just get rid of names.txt. Okay, so we've got rid of names.txt. If we open up the browser, we can see that that's now gone. Now, what we need to do is we need to this data is automatically going to be posted, as we've seen before with file handling. So what we need to do is, before we create this, in fact, we'll get rid of that altogether. What we want to do is we want to perform a check to see if this variable is set. So if name is set, remember we're posting this from here, so we're using the $_post because we've set the method to post, and we're using the isSet function to check this has been set. So if it has been set, we can specify this variable. So I'm going to say name equals $_post name. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to say if not empty name else, and in here we can just do an error message, please type, oh dear, type a name. Okay, so in here what we want to do now is, if the user has entered a name, we're all okay, so we can just test the functionality of this now. Click on file.php. So I'm going to type in a name, Alex. Click submit. So that's okay. If we don't type anything in, it prompts us to type a name. So this is all very well and good, but now we're inside here, what do we want to do? We want to open up a handle, and we want to open names.txt, and we want to open up this to append. Now what we want to do is fwrite, and we want to write to handle. So what data do we want to write to this? We want to write name. Now we want to append on a line break, so a / and n. So all the functionality of this program is we're asking the user to enter names, and every time they click submit and they submit a new name, it's going to write it to a new line in this file. So this is a real life example of where you can store data for your user input. Now we're going to say fclose, the all important fclose, and we're going to say handle inside that. So now let's check if it works. At the moment, if we go back to our file handling directory, we've got no names.txt, but once we type a name in and click submit, we haven't given a confirmation message, but all we can do is we can go back to here. You can see that a names.txt file exists, and we've got Alex in there. So let's go back again and type a new name in, click submit. Okay, and let's type in Stephen while we're here, and we can type Tom while we're here as well, so submit. So now if we go back to file handling directory and look in our names.txt, we can see that this has appended each name that we've processed through the form. That's appended that onto the end the end of the content of this file. So that's about it for appending. In the next tutorial we're going to look at reading this data in and then displaying it back out to the user. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and this is a tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this tutorial we're going to be learning to read data from a file, but obviously when you're reading data from a file it's not always on a line by line basis. You might find that you've got commas separating your values, and in this case we've got a few names here with commas separating each value. Now how do we deal with reading this in? Now we've already seen examples of reading in file data, but for now what we want to do is we want to create a handle as we've done previously. I've got this names.txt up here, but I'm just going to close it so it doesn't interfere with our program. I don't want to change anything inside. So handle equals fopen, and we want to pick a file to open, which is names.txt, and we're gonna open this for reading, so we're going to use an R here. Okay, now what we're going to do is we need to create a way to read the contents of the file, echo the contents of the file, and that's the first stage I'm going to take, just echoing out the contents to the PHP page. At the moment it looks like this, nothing's really happening. So how do we do this? What we do is we echo fread, and we take the handle in there. Now the second argument in this is the amount of data we want to read in. For now I'm just going to type 1000 just to make sure we read in all the characters. However, well, let's refresh first and you can see we've taken in all the data from the names.txt file. From Alex to Sandra, we've taken in all the data and we're displaying it. Now I don't want to read in 1000 bits or I think it's bytes. I'm not too great with that, but this is the amount of data it's reading in. Could be characters, I'm not sure, but it's something to look up. So I want to take in the file size rather than keep specifying. You know, if I was reading in a massive long file, I might say, oh, we'll just read in that amount of characters. You're wasting it doesn't look neat either. So what I want to do is I want to use a function called file size and then handle. So basically all this is doing is taking in the file size and reading in the file as a whole, not any more, not any less. So let's see if that's worked. Right, okay, so basically what we've done is as opposed to reading in you know, a particular file, we're reading in this open file. So what we need to do up here is we need to specify the file name. So I'm going to specify the file name as names.txt. That means that down here I can replace this with file name, and then I can replace this with file name as well. So now let's refresh and we should have that file up. Okay, so just to show you an example, if I wanted to only read in, say, 5, we'd just get the first 5 characters of that. So always use this file size and it will just open the exact amount of data within your file. Okay, so we don't want to echo this out, but what we do want to do is put it in a variable. So I'm going to call this variable data in. Now what we want to do with this is we want to split it up, and the character we want to split from is commas. So let's refresh again. Oh no, echo that out and refresh. Now we want to split it up through commas, and we use a function here called explode. So I'm going to say names array equals explode. What we do is we use we tell PHP the character we want to explode it with, and then we read in the what we want to explode. So if, for example, in here we had Alex, Billy, Dale, okay, and we wanted to explode that, we'd just be left with an array with Alex, Billy and Dale. But because we've got this data in variable with our data in, I mean, that's what we want to read in. We want to read in this, and we want Alex in an array element, Billy, Peter, Dale. So if we refresh, nothing's happened, no errors have occurred, which is fine. Now to test this, we can use the for each, and we can say for each names array as name, and what we want to do is echo name, and then we just append a break onto that. So essentially what we're doing is we're converting this file from a comma delimited file to a line by line, echoing it out to our browser and displaying the data to our browser. So if we refresh, hopefully that should work. Okay, so you can see that they're now on a line by line basis. Now there's one thing that you need to notice when dealing with these files, is that they do actually have extra spaces on, I believe. So let's just add a dot in there to test that. Oh no, they don't. Okay, that's absolutely fine, that's worked well. Okay, so we've now got this data that's been read in on a comma line file. So we've used explode, and we've read this in as an array. So now what we can do is we can do anything we like with this data because it's in an element of an array. For example, let's just get rid of this. If I wanted to say echo names array and say the the first element of the array, so the array with a key of 0, the key 0 has the value Alex because it's the first name in the list. So we're just reducing that down and printing out Alex, or echoing out Alex. So you can do anything you like with this data now that it's in an array, and we've done that simply by the explode function, using a comma to say, oh yeah, it's separated by comma. If it was separated by spaces, you could just use a space in here. And then just reading in the data just here. So that's how simple it is to read in sort of comma separated values within a file. Hi, this is Alex from PHP Academy, and this is another tutorial for the new Boston. Now in this example I'm going to be showing you something we did in the previous tutorial. We exploded data. So we took data from this file just here, names.txt, that was comma delimited, so we had commas in the middle of each piece of data, and we read it in and took away the commas and displayed it line by line, rendering it basically so we can do anything with each name. Now suppose I have an array like this one, and I've got 3 names in my array, and I want to add commas in between this data. So as it stands, it's in array format. We can access each element of the array by saying names array and putting in the key of the array. So here what would happen was we'd output Alex. Now I'm going to do completely what I did with completely opposite to what I did with the explode, and I'm going to use implode. So I'm going to create a string, and I'm going to call this variable string, and I'm going to say implode and give it the same comma that I did before, and in fact a space. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it the value names array. Now what we've actually done here straight away is we've taken away the array. We've taken away the array and we've created a string. So now if I just echo out string, you can see that we've created a string from this. So if I was reading in that data with the commas and I wanted to then say maybe output some updated data, I need some way of taking that array, putting commas back into it so I can pop it back into the file. So now what we can do is, after this, do our usual file open business just down here, open up the file, write to the file, or append to the file. So you can use the previous tutorials to achieve this. So it's simply achieved by the implode, and obviously you're not limited to what you can put in here. You could implode using, let's say, hyphens. So if we come down here, we'll get rid of this, and we could echo out string, for example. Now if I was to refresh, you can see that hyphens have been put in between the data. So this isn't just used for file handling, it can be used for a variety of different uses. If you're trying to get an array and you want to create some string data out of that, and you want to use a little delimiter in here, such as a comma or a forward slash, maybe even tabs or spaces, you can pop them in there and that will implode that for you. So if you think about exploding and imploding, it's the complete opposite.
Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another video for the new Boston. Now, we've already looked at file handling and how to open a file, have a look at the contents. However, what we need to look at is how we can read a specific directory and list all files. So you've probably already guessed there's going to be a loop somewhere in here to loop through the contents of a directory and display each file. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to just be displaying this as a list, and then we're going to create a hyperlink for each file so we can click on it. Now first of all, let me explain why this might be useful. Let's say you were creating some kind of file-based photo gallery, and you wanted to have several folders, for example. Let's just take a look at the directory structure that I've chosen. I've got file.php, which I have open in my text editor, and I've got this files directory here. Now inside here, let's just put a star in there, we've got first file.txt, second file.txt, and third file.txt. Now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking inside this files directory and listing all files. Now what happens if these were images? You may want to create a PHP script that searches a particular directory for a list of images and then displays them on a page. So you can adapt this example that I'm going to use really easily into your website and for your own purposes. So we're going to be using two different functions. We're going to be using the open directory and the read directory. Now you've probably guessed the difference between the two. The open directory function will actually open the directory and load it into a handle, much like we've done previously with loading a file into a handle. Then we can do something with it. With the read directory, we're going to put this into the loop and create the read directory as another variable. So the read directory is going to read the handle, which is then going to equate to another variable called file. So you'll understand probably a bit better when I go into the example and show you. So the first thing we need to do is set up a variable called directory, and I'm doing this simply so I can reuse this over and over again in my program. Now remember, the directory that we want to open is files, so I'm going to just type in files there. I'm not going to include any trailing slashes or anything like that. I'm going to let my program handle this later on, especially when, say, you were releasing some kind of script that used this to the public. You might want to create a variable such as file to read or something. Now you don't want your user to have to think, oh, do I need to put a slash there or a forward slash here or whatever. So you just want to have this as a single string with no other symbols in, just to make it a lot easier for you and anyone that might be looking at your code. So now what we want to do is we want to create a handle with using the opendir function. So we say handle equals opendir, and obviously we're going to be opening the directory that we've just specified, but then what we're going to be doing is appending on a forward slash. So in actual fact, when you read it in here, the directory is going to look like that, but we're just leaving this up to this line of code. Now we need to ensure that this returns a true value, so we need to ensure that this actually does open before we continue with the rest of our code, otherwise the rest of our code is going to be invalid. So what we need to do is put this in an if statement, much like we've put in a few other things like connecting to a database, for example, or just anything really we want to return true. So we can do this, we can set a variable at the same time as calling a function. So if this is true, then we need to go ahead and continue with the next step. Now just for purposes of aesthetics, making it look nice, I'm going to echo out looking inside, and then I'm going to put the directory name just here. So I'm going to say directory like that, so it will read looking inside files. This is another reason I didn't do slashes, because we're just going to specify the directory as plain string, how we want it to look and what we're looking inside. And I'm just going to append a break on there. I'm also going to enclose this directory text inside single quotation marks. Let's have a look at it at the moment. Okay, so it says looking inside file, so I want just single quotation marks on the outside of this to ensure that we enclose it. So I'm going to put a single quotation mark there and escape that character so it doesn't interfere with the start or end of our string, and I'm going to do the same just after that break and then put a escape string there, escape character there, I'm sorry. So now let's refresh and we can see that that's just been enclosed in single quotation marks. And we can even then just add a colon just to make it look a bit nicer. Okay, so we've established our little welcome, or our little message telling everyone what we're doing. Now what we need to do is we need to actually read the directory. So this is slightly different. We're going to be using a while loop. So let's come down a bit and we'll set up the skeleton for our while loop. Now inside here what we need to do is we first need to assign the variable file to reading the directory, because what's going to happen is file is then going to exist for every loop. It's going to exist for each element or if each file in our directory. So hopefully this will make sense in a moment when we write it and you see. So I'm going to say file equals read dir this time, and we're applying the handle into that. So we're reading in the handle that we've already opened with open dir. Now let me explain what happens in this loop. Every time we go around this loop, file is going to equal the next file along. So in this case we have, let's just double check, we've got 3 files here. So for the first loop we'll equal first file.txt, then second file.txt, then third file.txt. Now it will only represent in a string format, so file is now a string format. It won't actually be a link to the file, so we need to do that ourselves. So let's go ahead and just test this out. We can say echo file and then a line break. So let's preview this in our browser and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have the first file.txt, second file.txt and third file.txt. However, you can also see that we've got this double dot here and this single dot here. This is just part of a normal directory structure, so it's along with the other files, we've also got this, which means current directory, and this means back a directory. So these are the options that we can do by saying go back a directory or forward a directory, but we don't want to include these because we just want to look inside the files, look inside this files directory and list our files. So let's go and see what we can do to sort this out. Now we need to create a condition inside of our loop, so we need to create an if statement here, and we'll end that there. Remember your block. So we've created an if statement and we need to put a condition in here, and the condition is based upon something. If it's true, we're going to echo the file. So the condition could be if file doesn't equal a dot and file doesn't equal 2 dots. So if it doesn't equal a dot and doesn't equal 2 dots, then we can echo out a file. So therefore this dot and this 2 dots will be eliminated from our list, and this echo won't happen. Okay, they'll still exist, but this echo just won't happen. So let's go back and refresh and see what that's done. Okay, so that's got rid of the 1 and the 2 dots there. So we've achieved that just simply with an if statement here. Okay, so now what I want to do is create links to the files. And we can do this just by appending on an href equals, and then that's the start of the a tag, and then we end the a tag there, just like you'd do in an HTML document, a normal HTML document. Now the link is going to be the directory and then / the file. So inside here what we can do is just append on directory. So what I've done here, if you didn't already notice, I've ended the echo. So we've started the echo here, we've ended the echo here. We're using a dot to append on our directory, then we're using a dot to append on the rest of it. So we can just do, for short, like you just saw me do, two of these single quotation marks and then 2 dots, and then in here we can write our variable data. So it's directory, and then it's / and then 2 more dots, 2 more single quotation marks, and file. So now what we can see is when we refresh, you can see that these are links. Now if you look at the bottom of the video in the left hand corner, you can see localhost /series /file handling /files, and then first file.txt. If I move my mouse down to the second one, you can see that at the bottom of the video in the bottom of the browser, it changes to second file, and the same with third file. So now what we can do is click on these and view the contents of the first file, view the contents of the second file, and view the contents of the third file, which you can see I've just written the first file, second file and third file. But obviously if these were images, you could change the ahref tag, and you can instead change it to image source, and you could point the source to the image that's located within the directory. And you could also talk about using functions that we've already seen in previous tutorials by myself, to only show JPEG files. So what we could do is we could either read in the file itself and check the type, or we could select everything after the last dot and say, is it a JPEG file? But for now, I'll leave you with this. This is a basic most standard structure of looping through a file and displaying all files that don't equal a dot and 2 dots. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, back with another video for the new Boston. Now in this video we're going to be looking at checking whether a file exists before we actually create it on our server. Now why would we want to do this in a real life application? Well, let's say you had a file upload form and you were allowing users to upload specific files and maybe storing them in an area that they can be viewed for either public or your own personal use. So you may be asking users to upload, for example, CVs, or you may be asking them to upload images that contribute to part of a website. So you're going to have specific location or locations that you're going to store images in. However, if you're generating random, say, numbers for the image file names, they could still match. However random you create a number to be, there's always the possibility that it could match. So for example, what we could do is create a file name on upload. So if you haven't already looked at uploads, go back and have a look at that before you probably focus on this tutorial. Because you need to understand how we use the move uploaded file function to rename our file once we've moved it from a temporary location. Your file name might be rand number between say 1000 and 9999, and then you might have the MD5 hash of the original file name. So the file name might be called image.jpg, so MD5 hash file name, let's say OR for original, and then let's say you might have another random number between 1000 and 9999. So the MD5 hash is basically going to create a 32 character hash from this here. So let's go ahead and echo out the file name and see what result we get first of all. Okay, so this is the random file name that we may have generated to save on our server. So let's say the user, the first user uploads an image called image.jpg. Everything's fine, the image is stored. However, what happens if, say, 1,000 users later, someone else uploads an image called image.jpg, and this random number here and this random number here happen to equal the same as what's already been stored here and what's already been stored here. So there's a way we can deal with this, and we need to use the file exists function. So we can check whether a file exists before we perform an action. So let's go and have a look at this function itself. So the function is called file_exists. This is how we call the function, and the parameter that we give is the file name itself. So for example, I could say file exists file.txt or image.jpg, etc, etc, etc. So what I'm going to do is, in this example, I'm going to check whether a specific file exists, and if not, I'm going to create a text file. So we're not quite uploading images or documents at the moment, but you can apply this example to your own web application. So let's go ahead and say if file exists, and we need to specify a file name in here. We'll do that a bit later. Then what we're going to do is not create the file. So in here, we're not going to create the file. Otherwise, we're going to create a file. So the file is going to be called file.txt. So what we need to do is we need to say if file exists file name echo file already exists. Now what's going to happen is this file exists function is going to return a true value if the file already exists, and it's going to return a false value if the file does not exist. So if this is returned true, it means that this file.txt is already present in our directory here, in this file handling directory. But we can obviously specify different directories, so you may have a dir /file, for example. The folder might be called dir. So you can use directories within this file exists function as well. So if the file does exist, if this returns true, we're going to echo to the user file already exists. Otherwise, we're going to say handle equals fopen. And if you haven't already looked at file handling, have a look at this before you try to understand this code. Then we want to fopen file name for writing. We want to fwrite to handle, and I'm just going to write nothing inside, for example. And then we want to close this file by its handle. So what we've essentially done is we've checked this file.txt exists. So if it does already exist, we're just going to say to the user file already exists, so we're just going to give them an error message. Otherwise, we're going to open up a file, this is saved in the variable handle, and then we're going to write just the value of nothing to the file. So we're just writing this text into the file, and we're opening using the write. So this doesn't matter too much within this example. However, if you've already looked at creating files and writing data to files, this should make sense to you. So what we're going to do for this example is we are going to click on file.php, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go back and see if the file's been created. Then we're going to go back into file.php, and we should receive a message saying the file already exists, because what file.php is doing is creating this file for us. Let's go ahead and click on file.php. So we've got blank. So we can assume in this example that when we've run this page, that the file has been created. Let's go back and refresh. You can see that we've now got file.txt, and we've written the value of nothing to this. Now when we enter file.php for the second time, what we're now doing is we're checking if the file already exists, so if file.txt already exists. So now we can see if this function is properly working. So well, we already know that it's working because we've run the second block of the if statement, but let's go and check it anyway. So it says file already exists. So this is the file exists function in PHP. Really useful, like I said, when you're handling file uploads and you want to check if a file name already exists, just to ensure that you don't overwrite. Hi, this is Alex from phpacademy.org, and welcome back to another PHP video tutorial for the new Boston. Now we've already looked at creating files, putting content into files. Now what do we want to do if we want to delete or we want to rename files? So in this video we're going to go over a couple of functions with deleting files, and one function to rename files. So we have a function that specifically deletes a file that we specify, and then a function that renames a file to a file name of our choice. So I've got a file here called file-to-delete.txt, and I've got a file here called file-to-rename.txt. Now I'm not going to be using any examples in this tutorial. I'm just going to be showing you the functions and how they work, and we're going to be testing it in the video. But why might you want to delete a file? Well, let's just say you were allowing your users to upload files. You may be storing them somewhere, say in a database, or you may be giving them access to a link that maybe would let them delete the file. So if you wanted to allow your users to delete files that you've uploaded, then obviously this function that we're going to talk about in a moment is going to be useful to you. Now, why might you want to rename files? Well, first of all, like my prior example about the deleting the file, you may want to give your user the option to rename a file that they may have uploaded. You also might want to rename a file that already exists on your server. For example, if you were allowing users to upload files but you wanted to keep these as a hidden name, you could say generate an MD5 hash if you know how to do that, or you may generate some random numbers and call this file, let's say, a value of random numbers.txt, for example, obviously depending on whether it was a text file or another file type. So I've created this file called file to delete, and obviously we're going to be deleting this. and then I've created a file called file to rename, and we're going to be renaming this to a file name with a random number as the text of the file name. We're going to keep the extension .txt though. So let's just open up our browser so we know what we're doing. We can see the file.php is the PHP file that we're currently working on. This is where we're going to be performing our actions from. And we've got file to delete.txt, which we can keep an eye on because obviously we want to delete this, and file to rename because obviously we want to rename this file. So let's go ahead and talk about how we're going to delete a file. Now you may think that the function would be something like delete, but we actually have the function name as unlink. So we call the function like this. It's always a good idea to put this into an if statement. Once we've done it with the first argument, it only takes one argument. I think there's one argument which is an absolute must, and there may be other optional arguments, but go over to php.net and look up this function, and you'll be able to find specific information about it. So the argument that we give this is the file that we want to delete with regards to the whole file name. So let's go ahead and type file to delete.txt. Now if we were to run this program, it would delete the file. However, let's go ahead and put this into an if statement, and the first block is going to be if this is true. So in other words, if this file has been successfully deleted. So inside here we can say echo file has been deleted. We could also, just to make things run a lot smoother, and you're probably going to be storing your file name in a variable anyway, we can give a file name variable of string data type just up here. So let's go ahead and put the file name into a variable called file name, and then here let's reference that in there. So what we can do is we can say file and then maybe create some strong tags here, and we could then concatenate on the file name itself. So you can see how it's easy to reuse the same file name that we've specified up here. So otherwise we want to give an error message. Now we're going to be performing a test that is actually going to activate this error message, and that's going to be when we've already deleted the file. So once we've deleted the file, we're not going to be able to delete it again because obviously it doesn't exist. So we're going to be showing this. We're going to be running this script twice. The first time it's going to successfully delete the file, and the second time it's going to return us an error. Okay, so let's go ahead and put some text in. So file cannot be deleted. Just for example, you can obviously reference this variable in there if you want. It's entirely up to you. So as it stands, we're going to unlink the file name, so we're going to be deleting this file to delete.txt, and then we're going to be giving a confirmation message to the user.